I'm Paul Auster, and I'm a New York Mets fan.
I'm Bill Corbett. I'm a Boston Red Sox fan. And in 1986, I was not in Boston to watch the sixth game. I watched it with Paul in Brooklyn, in Cobble Hill. I was on the road with my daughter showing her some colleges, and we wound up here.
And you stayed with us at our apartment, and we watched the game there.
And we watched the game.
Yeah, so that's the only World Series game we've ever watched together. We've known each other for about 40 years, but that was it. And it seemed, as we all know, a sure thing that the Red Sox were going to win. It was so certain that my wife, Siri, who was watching the game with us, packed it in and went to bed before the last inning, congratulating Bill, who was sitting there with his Red Sox cap on throughout the entire game. And so then when the roof fell in on the Red Sox, to further humiliate Bill, and I felt so bad for him, I have to say, so bad that I almost wished that it hadn't happened. The neighborhood erupted in cheers, and from left and right and all around the neighborhood, whooping voices, celebrating the surprise victory. And Bill is a very good guy. He's got a lot of character. He can take adversity, but I've never seen his face so sad as that night.
Well, the neighborhood mattered a lot, and matters more in memory, because in 1975, the great Pudge Fisk game, and every Red Sox who remembers the Mets game has to go back there. I was watching that game at a friend's house, close enough to Fenway Park, so then the noise became overwhelming. We turned off the television set, just as we did in '86, turned it way down, and we're listening in Boston. We were listening to Fenway Park. In Brooklyn, you could hear the neighborhood be involved in this game. I was crushed by it, but there was a point in the Mets rally, and I can't say exactly when, where it began to feel inevitable in that way. Certain baseball games, it can happen in other sports, but in baseball, so many things can come together to make it happen that I just thought at one point, we are not going to win this game.
Right.
Obviously, the Buckner thing is another moment, but it just had that linkage where one thing leads to another, and you feel, not going to happen.
But the game was already tied when the ball went through Buckner's legs. So many disastrous things preceded that. But I remember feeling that the team was down. I mean, they were going to lose the series. There were 2 outs, and I think Carter was the first one to get a hit.
Yes.
And you saw him come up, and he was saying to himself, I'm not going to make the last out. I'm simply not going to let that happen. And then I think Kevin Mitchell might have been next, and he too said, I'm not going to let it happen.
That terrific
and
shot.
then maybe it was Ray Knight after that. I'm not going to let it happen. And it's the mark of a really good team, and they were a very good team. I mean, probably the best team the Mets have ever had in the 50-something years they've been in existence.
And the Red Sox were not a great team. In fact, they played one great game that got them into that, and that was the great Hendu Henderson one flap down home run off the ill-fated Donnie Moore against the Angels. And at that point, that happened on I think October 12th, the day after my birthday. We were at a party in Cambridge, and I took over the entire party in about the 8th inning and said, get the television in here. And we started to watch that game. I think it went to the 12th or 13th when they won that game, because we were behind to the Angels. You thought maybe this is what the headline was, something in the Globe the next day, like Destiny's Darlings.
Team was tested, that kind of thing.
And you thought, maybe, but this, Clemens had his best year as a Red Sox. Jim Rice, Dewey Evans, there were terrific players on that. Buckner had been good, no question about that, but it was not a deep pitching staff. Hurst had a journeyman year. We only had one reliever, and Bob Steamer Stanley, and a lot of guys like, Calvin Schiraldi, who ex-Met, who the Mets said when Schiraldi was on the mound in that debacle of an inning for us, that they could see in his eyes the fear.
Yeah. But I'm thinking about that Donnie Moore business. That was maybe one of the most tragic moments in baseball history.
Sure.
When Henderson hit that home run, it destroyed Donnie Moore. And within a few years, he tried to kill his wife. He missed. She was wounded, and he shot himself in front of her and the kids. He was destroyed by this. And you wonder, because it's no different from Branca and Thompson in '51, and they became great friends, and they traveled around the country for years together signing baseballs. And but Donnie Moore, he couldn't take it. So it's all a matter of character, who the players are, how they can take setbacks of that colossal scale.
Sure, but I'd have to say, Paul, as opposed to Branca and so many more games in '86. So much more time for drama to build. It seemed like that they occupied our attention for a long time. It was in the 20th, 25th, 26th. Was that 2 weeks after Moore that the Mets game ended? I mean, there's so much more baseball to talk about.
Yes.
And so I want to go to Buckner for a minute, because it was said afterwards that, well, Stapleton should have come in, and he'd come in the past. Buckner is a borderline Hall of Fame player who, no question, was hobbled, was wearing high top, that they used to call football shoes at that point. The second guessing in the Red Sox was about that, of course, and the other one was about Clemens wanting out, which ought to be mentioned, because Clemens, the curse of Roger Clemens is he never matured. He cannot tell the truth about something that is important. No, I didn't throw the bat at Mike Piazza. No, I didn't tell John McNamara. John McNamara was a sore head, a difficult manager, but he didn't lie about that. There was no reason for him to do that.
Can you just explain a little bit about what you're talking about? So it was that Clemens supposedly asked to be taken out?
Yeah, Clemens, Moore, John McNamara said that Clemens, who was leading in the game, asked to be taken out, said he didn't have any more.
What inning was it?
Seventh or eighth.
Seventh.
And Clemens claimed later that he had not said that at all. It didn't make any sense. At that point, Clemens was not the man we know today, but he'd already done things like, not to go back deeply in him, but at that point, it became significant afterwards because the Red Sox did not have a deep bullpen. And this was a winnable game. And he seemed... I don't why he wanted out. His thing was, of course I didn't want out. I wanted to stay there, but the manager removed me. And no.
You see, the other remarkable moment was before Wilson hit the ball. It was the moment when Mookie avoided the wild pitch, which was a really dexterous athletic feat, because it looked as if he was going to be hit. And he jumped, and as I see his body almost going prone in the air to avoid, and that was the wild pitch that led in the tying run.